Welcome back to Strategic Advice. I'm Phil Hahn, your host, and I'm joined today by Peter Krause, who is an associate professor at Boston College and a fellow research affiliate at MIT's Security Studies program. This year on MIT's SSP Strategic Advice, we're focusing on teaching and educating. So it's focused on brand new PhDs who have gotten the elusive tenure track or some type of teaching job. And now that you've caught the bus, or the question is, what do you do? How do you prepare for that first class? And one of the first topics, one of the first things you have to think about is syllabus creation. And so I've asked Peter if he would talk through today his philosophy or theory on syllabus creation, as well as provide any insight he can for those of us who can always learn how or improve how we put together our syllabi. So anyway, Peter, welcome to MIT SSP Strategic Advice.
Thanks again for having me, Phil. Looking forward to chatting about course syllabi.
All right, have at it.
All right, so yeah, we're in the short course syllabus creation season, right? I feel like the long season is the summer and the short season is kind of winter break. So many faculty are currently updating and or creating syllabi. So this is a great time to talk about this stuff. First off, congratulations to any of those who are watching this and teaching either a class for the first time or trying to plan and update syllabi. Always more to learn on this stuff. As I mentioned later, I probably update my syllabi, maybe 10 to 20% each year. And I've been teaching now for over a decade. So especially if you're working on topics that are ongoing and changing, and obviously there's new research all the time, we can always all get better at this stuff. But creating a syllabus for the first time can be daunting. So I'm going to try to talk through some approaches and strategies you can use to do that effectively. The first thing I would say is that you want to find out how much freedom you actually have to plan the syllabus for a given class. Many faculty have one or more classes that they were required to teach as part of their job. So you can always add your own approach and your own flavor to a class, but sometimes you have 100% full freedom for what you assign, how you teach it, etc. And other times there are core texts or core content that are set out for you. So before you start to dive into your full design for a class, make sure you're clear with your department chair or people in your subfield or otherwise. Are there certain requirements for how I teach this class? Maybe there's even a syllabus that you're supposed to use to some extent initially. So that's kind of step one. Step two is to think about how much time you kind of have to plan the syllabus, right? Obviously, before you're starting your first job or planning a class or otherwise, you don't always have an infinite amount of time. That's a lot of what teaching is, right? Is that you could always do better if you had a little more time, but you want to plan within the time that you have. So the way that you want to do that is to say, okay, I probably can't, create the whole syllabus entirely from scratch, every reading, every assignment, every possible thing. But if I have a day versus a week versus a month, I'm going to follow different strategies in terms of how I plan my syllabus and the various things that I focus on and prioritize. So I would also think about how much time you feel like you have for this, recognizing that this is a multi-year process, right? If Phil and I both went back to the syllabi for the courses we taught for the very first time and compared it even to the second or third year, let alone today, we would see a lot of evolution and change, not just because certain things are good or bad, but certain things work or don't work for you. Every faculty member or teacher is not the same in terms of their style. And so you're going to try a bunch of things out. You're going to find out what works for you. And oh, by the way, you're going to find out what works for your students, right? Because students aren't the same at every university or college in terms of how they learn or what they respond to. So this is an iterative process. Do your best to get it as good as you can the first time, but recognize that it's not going to be perfect and you're going to keep doing it over time. Okay, third thing I would say is make sure that you're including the requirements that you need on your syllabus. Again, there are certain school policies on academic integrity, on health resources. Again, a lot of people describe at least part of a syllabus as a contract, right? This is what the student is stepping into in terms of expectations for assignments, for grading, for time deadlines, etc. You want to have all of that stuff clearly laid out, not only because you want students to know what they're getting into when they sign up for your class, but also, again, inevitably this happens, not with most students, but sometimes where there's a dispute over grading standards or deadlines or otherwise, that is seen as a contract, not just by necessarily you and the student, but by the administration. If it's in the syllabus, it's like, okay, that's the way things are. When you deviate from the syllabus, that's when it can become more problematic. And certainly we can remember our time as students where maybe something happened that wasn't like it was in the syllabus, and we felt like we were a bit cheated there. We didn't have the clear expectations. So getting down those requirements is something important to do as well. you can often just ask one of your colleagues, can you look at one of their syllabi? Like, what are the key components that need to be on any syllabus, at this institution, and kind of, copy and paste a number of those things. Okay. With some of that stuff out of the way, let's now talk about the key thing when we talk about syllabus, which is, okay, all of the content and the assignments and the ways I'm going to structure the class, etc. For me, what I think is the best thing to do is start with just a blank sheet of paper on your computer or in front of you that you're writing, and start with your own ideas. Brainstorm. In an ideal world, what would be the goals of the class, the content that you're teaching, the sources that you love, the skills you want to teach, the assignments you want to use? What is the classroom environment like? What is the plan? How much are you doing lecture, discussion, group work? What is the size of the class? How does this connect to other classes that are in the department or otherwise? Do this in a vacuum, in the sense of, like, in your ideal world, what would all these things look like? Now, obviously, this won't all come to fruition, but I think if you start that way, again, you often have a lot of ability to modulate or adjust or build your classes over time. So it's good to recognize the requirements or what you're required to do, but I think it's also good to plan from your perspective, what would this class look like in an ideal world? And again, hit through each of those different elements. Once you've brainstormed like the goals, the content, the sources, the skills taught, etc., only then do I think it's the right time to now ask and collect syllabi from others. The reason to me is, and I say this to my students in terms of research as well, if you start by just reading what everyone else has done, I think that makes you like a horse with blinders on who kind of just thinks that that's the only way to do it. And so you're much more tied to the way others have done it before, in terms of, instead of how you want to do it. And your unique contribution as a teacher is how you want to teach this course, based on not just your experience, but what you think is good sources, what are interesting assignments, etc. So it's really valuable. And I'll talk in a moment. You can build your syllabus a lot based on other people's syllabi, especially the first year or two. But if you don't start with brainstorming yourself first, I think you limit your creativity and some of your own contributions. But again, once you've done that, yes, now gather syllabi. How do you do that? Get the syllabi, if you don't already have them, from the classes you loved in undergrad or grad school, right? Reach out to those professors if you don't have a copy, and get those. Ask friends and colleagues that you respect about the syllabi for their classes. Ask people who have taught this same course before you. Sometimes you're creating a course from scratch, but if you're doing like Intro to International Relations or something like that, probably someone at that same university has taught that class before. Ask them if you can have a copy of their syllabus. People you've never met before, but you respect, who maybe teach a similar class at a different university, reach out to them. People very commonly will share syllabi. And then finally, are there people that you know or feel like are good and respected teachers at your university or college, even if they teach in, biology or communications or whatever, there are elements of good teaching and good syllabus construction that go across different subfields. And so I think gathering a variety of syllabi from different sources like that can give you a great sense of, okay, there's not just one model, but there's lots of interesting things that good teachers do in terms of how they lay out and structure a course and structure a syllabus. And then again, this is only if you have time. The ones that most resonate with you, as you know, as a student, looking at a syllabus gives you some sense of how the course is run, but only from taking the course, or in your perspective, maybe talking to the professor, can you get a richer sense of exactly why they made that choice or why they're setting things up that way. So again, if with one or two people that, who syllabi you like, if you could set up a chat over coffee or otherwise to talk to them a little bit more, I think that will even further enrich your planning for the syllabus. So you've got your own brainstorming, you've got this collection of other people's syllabi. The only other things I would add is different universities have like centers for teaching excellence or teaching and learning. They often can talk to you about best practices or different practices for generating a syllabus. Looking for content, annual reviews are great places to go and see like what's up to date, or what's the most recent stuff published in this area. I know we all have our stuff coming out of grad school, or maybe we're very fresh, but there's always new things being published, and we want to make sure that we're including some of that. And I also say social media, as much as I really dislike lots of aspects of social media, especially around this time, you'll see a lot of professors saying, oh, can people recommend readings on this topic or whatever else? I've definitely found, assignments or readings from suggestions on social media that I then look into and decide that would be a great thing to include on the syllabus. So that's a great place to look as well. Now, it's normal during your first year, say you have 4 classes or 5 classes or 6 classes, that you're not creating every single one of those from scratch. So if I were to go back and look at my syllabi from year 1 versus now, year 1, they much more resembled a combination of other people's syllabi more than they do now, which much more just all kind of my own or almost all my own stuff. The early ones maybe were more 50-50 or 70-30, my own stuff, other people's stuff. Now it's almost all like stuff that I've thought of, or, I'm sure there's duplication, but in any case, it's normal your first year to say, hey, I took, Hosen's class on U.S. military power, or Hans class on coercion. I really liked it. I use a lot of those readings myself, and like that's an okay way to go. And then over time, you'll develop more of your own style. Other things I'll say: build a syllabus and build a course from both the top down and the bottom up. And what do I mean by that? Top down means think about big topics you want to cover, and then find the best readings and assignments and class plans to address those topics, right? So there's certain topics you definitely want to hit on. Start with the topic, then find that stuff. But I also think you should plan some things bottom up. And what I mean by that is, there are some excellent readings or resources or assignments that you really want to include that inspired you as a student or you think are really relevant. You can then build the class around that. So don't just feel like it has to be all top-down planning. Also include some bottom-up planning. Next thing I would say, I think a syllabus is a lot, not just about here's a reading, here's some pages, but the skills that you want the students to learn. I explicitly put that in my syllabus, right? Again, whether it's about how to ask good questions, how to generate original arguments, how to handle and triangulate data from different sources, that can be part of a syllabus in terms of putting for that week or that class, we're going to focus on learning this skill a bit, or we're going to focus on applying this skill to the readings that we had for today. I also think including a couple of big questions each class or each week that you're going to address can focus the students on what are some of the key things that we're asking here that we want you to have a good sense of when the class or the week is over. And in fact, when it comes time for a midterm exam, if I offer one or otherwise, I'll say to students, hey, this is a great potential study guide. Can you go through with someone else in the class and answer these questions to each other? And if you feel comfortable doing so, where you're incorporating the different lessons and concepts and readings from the class, now you have a good big picture sense of what we're trying to do here. So I think having some stuff on skills and questions there is really, really important. A couple of other things: making sure your syllabi are representative of the best work done on the issue, and really trying to include multiple perspectives. I think that that's really important, right? Even if you personally feel like, hey, I know this debate and here's where I fall on it. I think, at least personally, to be a good professor, you want to make sure you're assigning work from different perspectives, people with different backgrounds, different experiences on this stuff, because students should be coming to the class, at least in my opinion, not coming to be indoctrinated, but being taught how to think and being taught how to handle and judge the evidence themselves. And so I think conscientiously designing a course like that is important. And so I think that I would look into that in terms of how we're designing syllabi. And, alongside that, certainly in recent years as well, I think people have become more conscientious of trying to make sure the syllabus has not just, the people who wrote about this stuff 50 years ago, but people who are writing about it more recently, especially individuals maybe from more underrepresented backgrounds in the academy. I think that making sure that you have individuals who are writing about this stuff from different perspectives and experiences, I think can be a way to really enrich your syllabus and your class. A couple of other things I'll say. Sometimes you can include, especially if you're an SSP student, probably teaching poli-sci, like the news is often really relevant. And so I will often include it in my syllabus, but often my classes, maybe the first 5 minutes of a number of classes, we'll talk about relevant news for the day related to that given topic or whatnot. And that could be a great way for students to make connections between, hey, I'm reading about this conflict in the 1950s. How is this in any way relevant to my life? But now I'm talking about some news story and we talk about, oh, this is actually a situation of a security dilemma here, or a preemptive war, or whatever else, right? So you can see these connections and concepts to present day, which I think is important. A couple final points: trying out a variety of different class styles, lecture, full and small group discussions, think, pair, share, in-class writing, short documentaries, simulations. See the first year or two of teaching a class as, like experimenting on the students, but you are experimenting and trying out these different things to see what works for you and for them. And then the final thing I'll say is that, if you can do classroom observation of another professor, that can be great. But beyond that, when your semester is done or along the way, take notes on what worked and what doesn't. You'll think you'll remember next summer, but then you won't necessarily. So when a reading doesn't really work, take a note on it. The first thing I do when a semester starts is I create a new version of my syllabus with the next year in the title. And then as new readings I come across, I add them. As I have things I do or don't like, I make notes on the document. And then when it comes time to plan again the next year, I've already got a roadmap. Phil, what do you think? What are your thoughts on syllabus?
Well, I tell you what, you hit most of the questions I had here. So I only had a couple of comments, particularly for grad students, right? So one thing that I've tried to do is get buy-in, particularly for a new course. So with the students, hey, this is a brand new course I'm rolling out. We've done the best we can, but as we engage, we know we're going to need some feedback. And so trying to integrate that feedback early on so students have buy-in and then demonstrate to them that you're actually going to be using that to change the courses. And so sometimes okay, this reading, I have to admit, last week, I didn't think this reading worked. Did you all think the reading worked? Show a little of the scaffolding can help get buy-in and then help improve the course. The last comment I would have is particularly for courses that you get to pick is the relationship between your research and the course. And so I have used courses before because I was in a dean position. I didn't have the time to do research and teaching, to use teaching to jumpstart research programs, courses, as well as the other thing, which is having a research project that's nearing completion. And there's a reason books have chapters between 10 and 14 chapters. That's because you can have one each week. So thinking about designing your courses around the research is another thing you can do. So, well, that's all the time we have for today, unless you want any other comments to add, Peter.
Just one final quick. So first, I'll agree with both of those. On the first comment, I'll just say the very first day of my classes, as a way of introducing themselves, I ask students to not just say their name, but say, why did you take this class? Or what's a topic or a question you'd like to have addressed in this class? It's a great way to start some conversation, but then do exactly what you're saying, which is, yes, I have the syllabus planned, but if there's a great deal of interest in this or that topic, I can modulate and make some adjustments because it's just the first day. So I co-signed that comment in particular.
Yeah, I will say never come out and say this is my first time teaching. I don't know what I'm doing. Just fake it until you make it type of deal, but do ask for those type of inputs. All right, Peter, that's all the time we have today for advice from SSP. Have a great day.